Section 8 of the Aeneid. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Peter Meshkoff. The Aeneid by Virgil. Translated by J.W. McHale, Book 4th, The Love of Dido and Her End, Part 2. But good Aeneas, though he would fain soothe and comfort her grief, and talk away her distress with many a sigh, and melted in his soul by great love, yet fulfills the divine commands and returns to his fleet. Then indeed the Teucrians set to work, and haul down their tall ships all along the shore. The hulls are oiled and afloat, they carry from the woodland green boughs for oars, and massy logs unhewn, in hot haste to go. One might descry them shifting their quarters and pouring out of all the town, even as ants, mindful of winter, plunder a great heap of wheat and store it in their house. A black column advances on the plain as they carry home their spoil on a narrow track through the grass. Some shove and strain their shoulders at big grains. Some marshal the ranks and chastise delay. All the path is aswarm with work. What then were thy thoughts, O Dido, as thou sawest it? What sighs didst thou utter, viewing from the fortress roof the broad beach aswarm, and seeing before thine eyes the whole sea stirred with their noisy din? Injurious love, to what dost thou not compel mortal hearts? Again she must needs break into tears, again essay entreaty, and bow her spirit down to love, not to leave aught untried, and go to death in vain. Anna, thou seest the bustle that fills the shore. They have gathered round from every quarter. Already their canvas woos the breezes, and the merry sailors have garlanded the sterns. This great pain, my sister, I shall have the strength to bear, as I have had the strength to foresee. Yet this one thing, Anna, for love and pity's sake, for of thee alone was the traitor fain. To thee even his secret thoughts were confided, alone thou knewest his moods and tender fits. Go, my sister, and humbly accost the haughty stranger. I did not take the Grecian oath in Oilus to root out the race of Troy. I sent no fleet against her fortresses, neither have I disentombed his father Anchises' ashes and ghost, that he should refuse my words entrance to his stubborn ears. Whither does he run? Let him grant this grace, alas the last, to his lover, and await fair winds and an easy passage. No more do I pray for the old delusive marriage, nor that he give up fair Latium and abandon a kingdom. A breathing space I ask, to give my madness rest and room, till my very fortune teach my grief submission. This last favor I implore, sister, be pitiful, grant this to me, and I will restore it in full measure when I die. So she pleaded, and so her sister carries and recarries the piteous tale of weeping. But by no weeping is he stirred, inflexible to all the words he hears. Fate withstands and lays divine bars on unmoved mortal ears. Even as when the eddying blasts of northern alpine winds are emulous to uproot the secular strength of a mighty oak, it wails on, and the trunk quivers and the high foliage strews the ground. The tree clings fast on the rocks, and high as her top soars into heaven, so deep strike her roots to hell. Even thus is the hero buffeted with changeful perpetual accents, and distress thrills his mighty breast, while his purpose stays unstirred, and his tears fall in vain. Then indeed, hapless and dismayed by doom, Dido prays for death, and is weary of gazing on the arch of heaven. The more to make her fulfill her purpose and quit the light she saw when she laid her gifts on the altars alight with incense. Awful to tell, the holy streams blacken, and the wine turns as it poured into ghastly blood. Of this sight she spoke to none, no, not to her sister. Likewise there was within the house a marble temple of her ancient lord, kept of her in marvelous honor and fastened with snowy fleeces and festal boughs. Forth of it she seemed to hear her husband's voice crying and calling when night was dim upon the earth. And alone on the housetops the screech owl often made moan with funeral note and long-drawn, sobbing cry. Therewithal many a warning of wizards of old terrifies her with appalling presage. In her sleep fierce Aeneas drives her wildly, and ever she seems being left by herself alone, ever going uncompanioned on a weary way, and seeking her Tyrians in a solitary land, even as frantic Pentheus sees the arrayed Furies in a double sun, and Thebes shows herself twofold to his eyes, or Agamemnonian Orestes, renowned in tragedy, when his mother pursues him armed with torches and dark serpents, and the fatal sisters crouch avenging in the doorway. So when, overcome by her pangs, she caught the madness and resolved to die, she works out secretly the time and fashion, and accosts her sorrowing sister with mien hiding her design and hope calm on her brow. I have found a way, mine own, wish me joy, sister-like, to restore him to me, or release me of my love for him. Hard by the ocean limit and the set of sun is the extreme Ethiopian land, where ancient Atlas turns on his shoulders the starred burning axletree of heaven. Out of it hath been shown to me a priestess of Massilian race, warder of the temple of the Hesperides, even she who gave the dragon his food, and kept the holy boughs on the tree, sprinkling clammy honey and slumberous poppy seed. She professes with her spells to relax the purposes of whom she will, but on others to bring passion and pain, to stay the river waters and turn the stars backward. She calls up ghosts by night. Thou shalt see the earth moaning underfoot, and mountain ashes descending from the hills. I take heaven, sweet, to witness, and thee, mine own darling sister. I do not willingly arm myself with the arts of magic. Do thou secretly raise a pyre in the inner court, and let them lay on it the arms that the accursed one left hanging in our chamber, and all the dress he wore, and the bridal bed where I fell. It is good to wipe out all the wretch's traces, and the priestess orders thus. So speaks she, and is silent, while pallor overruns her face. Yet Anna deems not her sister veils death behind these strange rites, and grasps not her wild purpose, nor fears aught deeper than Ipsichius' death. So she makes ready as bidden. But the queen, the pyre being built up of piled faggots and sawn ilex in the innermost of her dwelling, hangs the room with chaplets and garlands it with funeral boughs. On the pillow she lays the dress he wore, the sword he left, and an image of him, knowing what was to come. Altars are reared around, and the priestess, with hair undone, thrice peals from her lips the 100 gods of Erebus and Chaos, and the triform Hecate, the triple-faced maidenhood of Diane. Likewise she had sprinkled pretended water of Avernus' spring, and rank herbs are sought mown by moonlight with brazen sickles, dark with milky venom, and sought is the talisman torn from a horse's forehead at birth, ere the dam could snatch it. Herself, the holy cake in her pure hands, hard by the altars, with one foot unshod and garments flowing loose, she invokes the gods ere she die, and the stars that know of doom, then prays to whatsoever deity looks in righteousness and remembrance on lovers ill-allied. Night fell. Weary creatures took quiet slumber all over the earth, and woodland and wild waters had sunk to rest. Now the stars wheel midway on their gliding path. Now all the country is silent, and beasts and gay birds that haunt liquid levels of lake or thorny rustic thicket lay couched asleep under the still night. But not so the distressed Phoenician, nor does she ever sink asleep, or take the night upon eyes or breast. Her pain redoubles, and her love swells to renewed madness, as she tosses on the strong tide of wrath. Even so she begins, and thus revolves with her heart alone. See, what shall I do? Shall I again make trial of mine own wooers that will scorn me, and stoop to sue for a Numidian marriage among those whom already, over and over, I have disdained for husbands? Then shall I follow the Ilian fleets and the uttermost bidding of the Teucrians? Because it is good to think they were once raised up by my succor, or the grace of mine own kindness is fresh in their remembrance? And how should they let me if I would, or take the odious woman on their haughty ships? Art thou ignorant on me, even in rune, and knowest not yet the forsworn race of Laomedon? And then, shall I accompany the triumphant sailors a lonely fugitive, or plunge forth girt with all my Tyrian train? So hardly severed from Sidon city, shall I again drive them seaward, and bid them spread their sails to the tempest? Nay, diest thou, as thou deservest, and let the steel end thy pain. With thee it began, overborne by my tears, thou, O my sister, dost load me with this madness and agony, and layest me open to the enemy. I could not spend a wild life without stain, far from the bridal chamber, and free from touch of distress like this. O faith ill kept, that was plighted to Sychaeus' ashes! Thus her heart broke in long lamentation. Now Aeneas was fixed to go, and now, with all set duly in order, was taking hasty sleep on his high stern. To him as he slept the god appeared once again in the same fashion of countenance, and thus seemed to renew his warning, in all points like to Mercury, voice and hue and golden hair and limbs gracious in youth. Goddess-born, canst thou sleep on in such danger, and seest not the coming perils that hem thee in, madman, nor hearest the breezes blowing fair? She, fixed on death, is revolving craft and crime grimly in her bosom, and swells the changing surge of wrath. Fliest thou not headlong, while headlong flight is yet possible? Even now wilt thou see the ocean weltering with broken timbers, see the fierce glare of her torches, and the beach in a riot of flame, if dawn break on thee yet dallying in this land. Up-ho! Linger no more. Woman is ever a fickle and changing thing. So spoke he, and melted in the black night. Then indeed Aeneas, startled by the sudden phantom, leaps out of slumber and bestirs his crew. Haste and awake, O men, and sit down to the thwarts, shake out sails speedily. A god sent from high heaven, lo, again spurs us to speed our flight and cut the twisted cables. We follow thee, Holy One of Heaven, whoso thou art, and again joyfully obey thy command. O be favorable, give gracious aid, and bring fair sky and weather. He spoke, and snatching his sword like lightning from the sheath, strikes at the hawser with the drawn steel. The same zeal catches all at once. Rushing and tearing they quit the shore. The sea is hidden under their fleets. Strongly they toss up the foam and sweep the blue water. And now dawn broke, and, leaving the saffron bed of Tithonus, shed her radiance anew over the world, when the queen saw from her watchtower the first light whitening, and the fleet standing out under squared sail, and discerned shore and haven empty of all their oarsmen. Thrice and 4 times she struck her hand on her lovely breast, and rent her yellow hair. God, she cries, shall he go? Shall an alien make mock of our realm? Will they not issue in armed pursuit from all the city, and some launch ships from the dockyards? Go, bring fire in haste, serve weapons, swing out the oars. What do I talk, or where am I? What mad change is on my purpose? Alas, Dido, now thou dost feel thy wickedness that had graced thee once when thou gavest away thy crown. Behold the faith and hand of him whom, they say, carries his household's ancestral gods about with him, who stooped his shoulders to a father outworn with age. Could I not have riven his body in sunder and strewn it on the waves, and slain with the sword his comrades and his dear Ascanius, and served him for the banquet at his father's table? But the chance of battle had been dubious. If it had, whom did I fear with my death upon me? I should have borne firebrands into his camp, and filled his decks with flame, blotted out father and son and race together, and flung myself atop of all. Sun, whose fires lighten all the works of the world, and thou, Juno, mediatress and witness of these my distresses, and Hecate, cried on by night in crossways of cities, and you, fatal avenging sisters and gods of dying Alyssa, hear me now. Bend your just deity to my woes, and listen to our prayers. If must needs be that the accursed one touch his haven and float up to land, if thus Jove's decrees demand, and this the appointed term, yet, distressed in war by an armed and gallant nation, and driven homeless from his borders, rent from Ilias's embrace, let him sue for succor, and see death untimely on his people. Nor when he hath yielded him to the terms of a harsh peace, may he have joy of his kingdom, or the pleasant light. But let him fall before his day, and without burial on a waste of sand. This I pray. This, and my blood with it I pour for the last utterance. And you, O Tyrians, hunt his seed with your hatred for all ages to come. Send this guerdon to our ashes. Let no kindness nor truce be between nations. Arise out of our dust, O unnamed avenger, to pursue the Dardanian settlement with firebrand and steel. Now then, whensoever strength shall be given, I invoke the enmity of shore to shore, wave to water, sword to sword. Let their battles go down to their children's children. So speaks she, as she kept turning her mind round about, seeking how soonest to break away from the hateful light. Thereon she speaks briefly to Bars, nurse of Sychaeus, for a heap of dusky ashes held her own in her country of long ago. Sweet nurse, bring Anna my sister hither to me. Bid her haste and sprinkle river water over her body, and bring with her the beasts ordained for expiation. So let her come, and thou likewise veil thy brows with a pure chaplet. I would fulfill the rites of Stygian Jove that I have fitly ordered and begun, so to set the limit to my distresses and give over to the flames the funeral pyre of the Dardanian. So speaks she. The old woman went eagerly with quickened pace. But Dido, fluttered and fierce in her awful purpose, with bloodshot restless gaze and spots on her quivering cheeks burning through the pallor of imminent death, bursts into the inner courts of the house, and mounts in madness the high funeral pyre, and unsheaths the sword of Dardania, a gift asked for no use like this. Then after her eyes fell on the Ilian raiment and the bed she knew, dallying with her purpose through her tears, she sank on the pillow and spoke the last words of all. Dress ye wore, sweet while doom and deity allowed, receive my spirit now and release me from my distresses. I have lived and fulfilled fortune's allotted course, and now I shall go a queenly phantom under the earth. I have built a renowned city, I have seen my ramparts rise. By my brother's punishment I have avenged my husband of his enemy. Happy, ah me, and over happy, had but the keels of the Dardania never touched our shores. She spoke, and burying her face in the pillow, Death it will be, she cries, and unavenged, but death be it. Thus it is good to pass into the dark. Let the pitiless Dardanian's gaze drink in this fire out at sea, and my death be the omen he carries on his way. She ceased, and even as she spoke, her people see her sunk on the steel, and blood reeking on the sword and spattered on her hands. A cry rises in the high halls, rumor riots down the quaking city. The house resounds with lamentation and sobbing and bitter crying of women. Heaven echoes their loud wails, even as though all Carthage or ancient Tyre went down as the foe poured in, and the flames rolled furious over the roofs of house and temple. Swooning at the sound, her sister runs in a flutter of dismay, with torn face and smitten bosom, and darts through them all, and calls the dying woman by her name. Was it this, mine own? Was my summons a snare? Was it this thy pyre, ah me, this thine altar fires meant? How shall I begin my desolate moan? Didst thou disdain a sister's company in death? Thou shouldst have called me to share thy doom. In the selfsame hour, the selfsame pang of steel had been our portion. Did these very hands build it? Did my voice call on our father's gods, that with thee lying thus I should be away as one without pity? Thou hast destroyed thyself and me together, O my sister, and the Sidonian lords and people, and this thy city. Give her wounds water. I will bathe them and catch on my lips the last breath that haply yet lingers. So speaking, she had climbed the high steps, and, wailing, clasped and caressed her half-lifeless sister in her bosom, and staunched the dark streams of blood with her gown. She, essaying to lift her heavy eyes, swoons back. The deep-driven wound gurgles in her breast. Thrice she rose, and strained to lift herself on her elbow. Thrice she rolled back on her pillow, and with wandering eyes sought the light of high heaven, and moaned as she found it. Then Juno omnipotent, pitying her long pain and difficult to seize, sent Iris down from heaven to unloose the struggling life from the body where it clung. For since neither by fate did she perish, nor as one who had earned her death, but woefully before her day, and fired by sudden madness, not yet had Proserpine taken her lock from the golden head, nor sentenced her to the Stygian underworld. So Iris on dewy saffron pinions flits down through the sky athwart the sun in the trail of 1,000 changing dyes, and stopping over her head, "This hair, sacred to Dis, I take as bidden, and release thee from that body of thine." So speaks she, and cuts it with her hand, and therewith all the warmth ebbed forth from her, and the life passed away upon the winds. End of Section 8. Recording by Pete Meshkoff.
Section 9 of the Aeneid. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Morgan Scorpion. The Aeneid by Virgil. Translated by J. W. Mikhail. Chapter 10. The Games of the Fleet. Part 1. Meanwhile, Aeneas and his fleet in unwavering track now held mid-passage, and cleft the waves that blackened under the north, looking back on the city that even now gleams with hapless Elissa's funeral flame. Why the broad blaze is lit lies unknown, but the bitter pain of a great love trampled, and the knowledge of what woman can do in madness, draw the Teucrians' hearts to gloomy guesses. When their ships held the deep, nor any land farther appears, the seas all round, and all round the sky, a dusky shower drew up overhead, carrying night and storm, and the wave shuddered and gloomed. Palinurus, master of the fleet, cries from the high stern, "Alas, why have these heavy storm clouds girt the sky? Lord Neptune, what wilt thou?" Then he bids clear the rigging and bend strongly to the oars, and brings the sails across the wind, saying thus: "Noble Aeneas, not did Jupiter give word and warrant would I hope to reach Italy under such a sky. The shifting winds roar athwart our course and blow stronger out of the black west, and the air thickens into mist. Nor are we fit to force our way on and across. Fortune is the stronger. Let us follow her and turn our course whither she calls. Not far away, I think, are the faithful shores of thy brother Eryx and the Sicilian haven. If only my memory retraces rightly the stars I watched before. Then, good Aeneas, even I ere now discern the winds will have it so, and thou urgest against them in vain. Turn thou the course of our sailing. Could any land be welcomer to me, or where I would sooner choose to put in my weary ships, than this that hath Dardanian Acestes to greet me, and laps in its embrace Lord Anchises' dust." This said, they steer for harbour, while the following west wind stretches their sails, the fleet runs fast down the flood, and at last they land joyfully on the familiar beach. But Acestes, high on a hilltop, amazed at the friendly squadron approaching from afar, hastens towards them, weaponed and clad in the shaggy skin of a Libyan she-bear. Him a Trojan mother conceived, and bore to Grimnissus river. Not forgetful of his parentage, he wishes them joy of their return, and gladly entertains them on his rustic treasure and comforts their weariness with his friendly store. So soon as the morrow's clear daylight had chased the stars out of the east, Aeneas calls his comrades along the beach together, and from a mounded hillock speaks. Great people of Dardanus, born of the high blood of gods, the yearly circle of the months is measured out to fulfilment since we laid the dust in earth, all that was left of my divine father, and sadly consecrated our altars. And now the day is at hand. This, O gods, was your will, which I will ever keep in grief, ever in honour. Did I spend it an exile on Gaetulian quicksands, did it surprise me on the Argolic sea or in Mycenae town, yet would I fulfil the yearly vows and annual ordinance of festival, and pile the altars with their due gifts. Now we are led hither, to the very dust and ashes of our father, not as I deem without divine purpose and influence, and borne home into the friendly haven. Up then, and let us all gather joyfully to the sacrifice. Pray we for winds, and may he deign that I pay these rites to him year by year in an established city and consecrated temple. 2 head of oxen Acestes, the seed of Troy, gives to each of your ships by tale. Invite to the feast your own ancestral gods of the household, and those whom our host Acestes worships. Further, so the 9th dawn uplift the gracious day upon men, and her shafts unveil the world, I will ordain contests for my Trojans, first for swift ships, then whoso excels in the foot race, and whoso, confident in strength and skill, comes to shoot light arrows, or adventures to join battle with gloves of raw hide. Let all be here, and let merit look for the prize and palm. Now all be hushed, and twine your temples with boughs. So speaks he, and shrouds his brows with his mother's myrtle. So Helymus does, so Aletes ripe of years, so the boy Ascanius, and the rest of the people follow. He advances from the assembly to the tomb among a throng of many thousands that crowd about him. Here he pours on the ground in fit libation 2 goblets of pure wine, 2 of new milk, 2 of consecrated blood, and flings bright blossoms, saying thus: "Hail, holy father! Once again hail! Ashes of him I saved in vain, and soul and shade of my sire. Thou wert not to share the search for Italian borders and destined fields, nor the dim Ausonian Tiber." Thus had he spoken, when from beneath the sanctuary a snake slid out in 7 vast coils and 7-fold slippery spires, quietly circling the grave and gliding from altar to altar, his green checkered body and the spotted lustre of his scales ablaze with gold, as the bow in the cloud darts 1,000 changing dyes athwart the sun. Aeneas stood amazed at the sight. At last he wound his long train among the vessels and polished cups, and tasted the feast, and again leaving the altars where he had fed, crept harmlessly back beneath the tomb. Doubtful if he shall think it the genius of the ground or his father's ministrant, he slays, as is fit, 2 sheep of 2 years old, as many swine and dark-backed steers, pouring the while cups of wine, and calling on the soul of great Anchises and the ghost re-arisen from Acheron. Therewithal his comrades, as each hath store, bring gifts to heap joyfully on the altars, and slay steers in sacrifice. Others set cauldrons a-row, and, lying along the grass, heap live embers under spits, and roast the flesh. The desired day came, and now the 9th dawn rose up clear and bright behind Phaeton's coursers, and the name and renown of illustrious Acestes had stirred up all the bordering people. Their holiday throng filled the shore to see Aeneas' men, and some ready to join in contest. First of all the prizes are laid out to view in the middle of the racecourse: tripods of sacrifice, green garlands and palms, the reward of the conquerors, armours and garments dipped in purple, talents of silver and gold. And from a hillock in the mist the trumpet sounds, the games begun. First is the contest of rowing, and 4 ships matched in weight enter, the choice of all the fleet. Mnestheus' keen oarsmen drive the swift dragon, Mnestheus the Italian to be, from whose name is the Memnian family. Gyas the huge bulk of the huge Chimera, a floating town, whom her triple-tiered Dardanian crew urge on with oars rising in 3-fold rank. Sergestus, from whom the Sergian house holds her name, sails in the tall centre. And in the sea-coloured Scylla, Cloanthus, whence is thy family? Cluentius of Rome. Apart in the sea, and over against the foaming beach, lies a rock that the swollen waves beat and drown what time the north-western gales of winter blot out the stars. In calm it rises silent out of the placid water, flat-topped, and a haunt where cormorants love best to take the sun. Here Lord Aeneas set up a goal of leafy ilex, a mark for the sailors to know whence to return, where to the wheel their long course round. Then they choose stations by lot, and on the sterns their captains glitter afar, beautiful in gold and purple. The rest of the crews are crowned with poplar sprays, and their naked shoulders glisten wet with oil. They sit down at the thwarts, and their arms are tense on the oars. At full strain they wait the signal, while throbbing fear and heightened ambition drain their riotous blood. Then, when the clear trumpet note rang, all in a moment leap forward from their line. The shouts of the sailors strike up to heaven, and the channels are swept into foam by the arms as they swing backwards. They cleave their furrows together, and all the sea is torn asunder by oars and triple-pointed prows. Not with speed so headlong do racing pairs whirl the chariots over the plain, as they rush streaming from the barriers. Not so do their charioteers shake the wavy reins loose over their team and hang forward on the whip. All the woodland rings with clapping and shouts of men that cheer their favourites, and the sheltered beach eddies back their cries, the noise buffets and re-echoes from the hills. Gyas shoots out in front of the noisy crowd and glides foremost along the water, whom Cloanthus follows next, rowing better, but held back by his dragging weight of pine. After them, at equal distance, the dragon and the centaur strive to win the foremost room. And now the dragon has it, now the vast centaur outstrips and passes her. Now they dart on both together, their stems in a line, and their keels driving long furrows through the salt waterways. And now they drew nigh the rock, and were hard on the goal, when Gyas as he led, winner over half the flood, cries out to Menoetes, the ship's steersman, "Whither away so far to the right? This way direct her path, kiss the shore, and let the oar blades graze the leftward reefs. Others may keep to deep water." He spoke, but Menoetes, fearing blind rocks, turns the bow away towards the open sea. "Whither wanderest thou away? To the rocks, Menoetes," again shouts Gyas, to bring him back. And lo, glancing round he sees Cloanthus passing up behind and keeping nearer. Between Gyas' ship and the echoing crags he scrapes through inside on his left, flashes past his leader, and leaving the goal behind, is in safe water. Then indeed grief burned fierce through his strong frame, and tears sprung out on his cheeks. Heedless of his own dignity and his crew's safety, he flings the too cautious Menoetes sheer into the sea from the high stern, himself succeeds as guide and master of the helm, and cheers on his men, and turns his tiller into shore. But Menoetes, when at last he rose struggling from the bottom, heavy with advancing years and wet in his dripping clothes, makes for the top of the crag and sits down on a dry rock. The Teucrians laughed out as he fell and as he swam, and laughed to see him spitting the salt water from his chest. At this a joyful hope kindled in the two behind, Sergestus and Mnestheus, of catching up Gyas' wavering course. Sergestus slips forward as he nears the rock, yet not all in front, nor leading with his length of keel. Part is in front, part pressed by the dragon's jealous prow, but striding amidships between his comrades. Mnestheus cheers them on. Now, swing back, oarsmen who were Hector's comrades, whom I chose to follow me in Troy's extremity. Now put forth the might and courage you showed in Gaetulian quicksands, amid Ionian seas and Malea's chasing waves. Not the first place do I now seek for Mnestheus, nor strive for victory, though, yet let them win, O Neptune, to whom thou givest it. But the shame of coming in last, win but this, fellow citizens, and avert that disaster. His men bend forward, straining every muscle. The brasswork of the ship quivers to their mighty strokes, and the ground runs from under her. Limbs and parched lips shake with their rapid panting, and sweat flows in streams all over them. Mere chance brought the crew the glory they desired. For while Sergestus drives his prow furiously in towards the rocks, and comes up with too scanty room, alas, he caught on a rock that ran out, the reef ground, the oars struck and shivered on the jagged teeth, and the bows crashed and hung. The sailors leap up and hold her with loud cries, and get out iron-shod poles and sharp-pointed boat-hooks, and pick up their broken oars out of the eddies. But Mnestheus, rejoicing and flushed by his triumph, with oars fast dipping and winds at his call, issues into the shelving water and runs down the open sea. As a pigeon whose house and sweet nestlings are in the rock's recesses, if suddenly started from her cavern, wings her flight over the fields and rushes frightened from her house with loud clapping pinions, then gliding noiselessly through the air, slides on her liquid way and moves not her rapid wings. So Mnestheus, so the dragon under him swiftly cleaves the last space of sea, so her own speed carries her flying on. And first Sergestus is left behind, struggling on the steep rock and shoal water, and shouting in vain for help, and learning to race with broken oars. Next he catches up Gyas and the vast bulk of the Chimera. She gives way without her steersman. And now on the very goal Cloanthus alone is left. Him he pursues and presses hard, straining all his strength. Then indeed the shouts redouble, all together eagerly cheer on the pursuer, and the sky echoes their din. These scorn to lose the honour that is their own, the glory in their grasp, and would sell life for renown. To these success lends life, power comes with belief in it, and haply they carried the prize with prows abreast, had not Cloanthus, stretching both his open hands over the sea, poured forth prayers and called the gods to hear his vows. Gods who are sovereign on the sea, over whose waters I run, to your altars on this beach will I bring a snow-white bull, my vows' glad penalty, and will cast his entrails into the salt flood and pour liquid wine. He spoke, and far beneath the flood maiden Panopeia heard him, with all Phorcys' choir of Nereids, and lord Portunus with his own mighty hand pushed him on his way. The ship flies to land swifter than the wind or an arrow's flight, and shoots into the deep harbour. Then the seed of Anchises, summoning all in order, declares Cloanthus conqueror by herald's outcry, and dresses his brows in green bay, and gives gifts to each crew, 3 bullocks of their choice, and wine, and a large talent of silver to take away. For their captains he adds special honours. To the winner a scarf wrought with gold, encircled by a double border of deep Meliboean purple. Woven in it is the kingly boy on leafy Ida, chasing swift stags with javelin and racing feet, keen and as one panting. Him Jove's swooping armour-bearer hath caught up from Ida in his talons, his aged guardians stretch their hands vainly upward, and the barking of hounds rings fierce into the air. But to him who next in merit held the second place, he gives to wear a corslet triple woven with hooks of polished gold, stripped by his own conquering hand from Demoleus under tall Troy by the swift Simois, an ornament and safeguard among arms. Scarce could the straining shoulders of his servants Phegeus and Sagaris carry its heavy folds. Yet with it on, Demoleus at full speed would chase the scattered Trojans. The third prize he makes twin cauldrons of brass, and bowls wrought in silver and rough with tracery. And now all moved away in the pride and wealth of their prizes, their brows bound with scarlet ribbons, when, hardly torn loose by all his art from the cruel rock, his oars lost, rowing feebly with a single tear, Sergestus brought in his ship jeered at and unhonoured. Even as often a serpent caught on a highway, if a brazen wheel hath gone aslant over him, or a wayfarer left him half dead and mangled with the blow of a heavy stone, wreathes himself slowly in vain effort to escape, in part undaunted, his eyes ablaze and his hissing throat lifted high. In part the disabling wound keeps him coiling in knots and twisting back on his own body. So the ship kept rowing slowly on, yet hoists sail and under full sail glides into the harbour mouth. Glad that the ship is saved and the crew brought back, Aeneas presents Sergestus with his promised reward. A slave woman is given him, not unskilled in Minerva's labours, Pholoe the Cretan, with twin boys at her breast. This contest sped, good Aeneas moved to a grassy plain girt all about with winding wooded hills, and amid the valley an amphitheatre, whither, with a concourse of many thousands, the hero advanced and took his seat on a mound. Here he allures with rewards and offer of prizes those who will try their hap in the fleet foot race. Trojans and Sicilians gather mingling from all sides. Nisus and Euryalus foremost, Euryalus in the flower of youth and famed for beauty, Nisus for pure love of the boy. Next follows renowned Diores of Priam's royal line, after him Salius and Patron together, the one Acarnanian, the other Tegean by family and of Arcadian blood. Next 2 men of Sicily, Helymus and Panopes, foresters and attendants on old Acestes, many besides whose fame is hid in obscurity. Then among them all Aeneas spoke thus: "Hearken to this, and attend in good cheer. None out of this number will I let go without a gift. To each will I give 2 glittering Gnosian spearheads of polished steel, and an axe chased with silver to bear away. One and all shall be honoured thus. The 3 foremost shall receive prizes, and have pale olive bound about their head. The first shall have a caparisoned horse, as conqueror; the second an Amazonian quiver filled with the arrows of Thrace, girt about by a broad belt of gold, and on the link of the clasp a polished gem. Let the third depart with this Argolic helmet for recompense." This said, they take their place, and the signal once heard, dart over the course and leave the line, pouring forth like a storm cloud while they mark the goal. Nisus gets away first, and shoots out far in front of the throng, fleeter than the winds or the winged thunderbolt. Next to him, but next by a long gap, Salius follows, then, left a space behind him, Euryalus third, and Helymus comes after Euryalus. And closer behind him, lo, Diores goes flying, just grazing foot with foot, hard on his shoulder, and if a longer space were left he would creep out past him and win the tie. And now, almost in the last space, they begin to come up breathless to the goal, when unfortunate Nisus trips on the slippery blood of the slain steers, where haply it had spilled over the ground and wetted the green grass. Here, just in the flush of victory, he lost his feet. They slid away on the ground they pressed, and he fell forward right among the ordure and blood of the sacrifice. Yet forget he not his darling Euryalus, for rising, he flung himself over the slippery ground in front of Salius, and he rolled over and lay all along on the hard sand. Euryalus shoots by, wins and holds the first place his friend gave, and flies on amid prosperous clapping and cheers. Behind Helymus comes up, and Diores now third for the palm. At this Salius fills with loud clamour the whole concourse of the vast theatre, and the lords who looked on in front, demanding restoration of his defrauded prize. Euryalus is strong in favour, and beauty in tears, and the merit that gains grace from so fair a form. Diores supports him, who succeeded to the palm, so he loudly cries and bore off the last prize in vain, if the highest honours be restored to Salius. Then Lord Aeneas speaks: "For you, O boys, your rewards remain assured, and none alters the prize's order. Let me be allowed to pity a friend's innocent mischance." So speaking, he gives to Salius a vast Gaetulian lion skin, with shaggy masses of hair and claws of gold. "If this," cries Nisus, "is the reward of defeat, and thy pity is stirred for the fallen, what fit recompense wilt thou give to Nisus? To my excellence the first crown was due, had not I, like Salius, met fortune's hostility." And with words he displayed his face and limbs foul with the wet dung. His lord laughed kindly on him, and bade a shield be brought forth, the workmanship of Didymaon, torn by him from the hallowed gates of Neptune's Grecian temple. With this special prize he rewards his excellence. Thereafter, when the races are finished and the gifts fulfilled, "Now," he cries, "come whoso hath in him valour and a ready heart, and lift up his arms with gauntleted hands." So speaks he, and sets forth a double prize of battle: for the conqueror a bullock gilt and garlanded, a sword and beautiful helmet to console the conquered. Straightway, without pause, Dares issues to view in his vast strength, rising amid loud murmurs of the people. he who alone was wont to meet Paris in combat, he who at the mound where princely Hector lies struck down as he came the vast bulk upborne by conquering Butes of Amycus' Bebrycian line, and stretched him in death on the yellow sand. Such was Dares. At once he raises his head high for battle, displays his broad shoulders, and stretches and swings his arms right and left, lashing the air with blows. For him another is required, but none out of all the train durst approach or put the gloves on his hands. So he takes his stand exultant before Aeneas' feet, deeming he excelled all in victories, and thereon without more delay grasps the bull's horn with his left hand, and speaks thus: "Goddess born, if no man dare trust himself to battle, to what conclusion shall I stand? How long is it seemly to keep me? Bid me carry off thy gifts." Therewith all the Dardanians murmured assent, and bade yield him the promised prize. At this aged Acestes spoke sharply to Entellus, as he sate next him on the green cushion of grass: "Entellus, bravest of heroes, once of old in vain, wilt thou thus idly let a gift so great be borne away uncontested? Where now, prithee, is divine Eryx, thy master of fruitless fame? Where thy renown over all Sicily, and those spoils hanging in thy house?" Thereat he: "Desire of glory is not gone, nor ambition checked by fear, but torpid age dulls my chilly blood, and my strength of limb is numb and outworn. If I had what once was mine, if I had now that prime of years, yonder braggart's boast and confidence, it had taken no prize of goodly bullock to allure me, nor heed I these gifts." So he spoke, and on that flung down a pair of gloves of giant weight, with whose hard hide bound about his wrists valiant Eryx was wont to come to battle. They stood amazed, so stiff and grim lay the vast sevenfold oxhide sewn in with lead and iron. Dares most of all shrinks far back in horror, and the noble son of Anchises turns round this way and that with their vast weight and voluminous folds. Then the old man spoke thus in deep accents: "How had they seen the gloves that were Hercules' own armour, and the fatal fight on this very beach? These arms thy brother Eryx once wore; thou seest them yet stained with blood and spattered brains. In them he stood to face great Alcides. To them was I used while fuller blood supplied me strength, and envious old age had not yet strewn her snows on either temple. But if Dares of Troy will have none of these our arms, and good Aeneas is resolved on it, and my patron Acestes approves, let us make the battle even. See, I give up the gauntlets of Eryx. Dismiss thy fears, and do thou put off thy Trojan gloves." So spoke he, and throwing back the fold of his raiment from his shoulders, he bares the massive joints and limbs, the great bones and muscles, and stands up huge in the middle of the ground. Then Anchises' lordly seed brought out equal gloves and bound the hands of both in matched arms. Straightway each took his stand on tiptoe, and undauntedly raised his arms high in the air. They lift their heads right back and away out of reach of blows, and make hand play through hand, inviting attack, the one nimbler of foot and confident in his youth, the other mighty in mass of limb, but his knees totter tremulous and slow, and sick panting shakes his vast frame. Many a mutual blow they deliver in vain, many an one they redouble on chest and side, sounding hollow and loud. Hands play fast about ear and temple, and jawbones clash under the hard strokes. Old Entellus stands immovable under strain, only parrying hits with body and watchful eye. The other, as one who casts mounts against some high city or blockades a hill fort in arms, tries this and that entrance, and ranges cunningly over all the ground, and presses many an attack in vain. Entellus rose and struck clean out with his right downwards. His quick opponent saw the descending blow before it came, and slid his body rapidly out of its way. Entellus hurled his strength into the air, and all his heavy mass overreaching fell heavily to the earth, as sometime on Erymanthus or mighty Ida a hollow pine falls torn out by the roots. Teucrians and men of Sicily rise eagerly. A cry goes up, and Acestes himself runs forward and pityingly lifts his friend and birthmate from the ground. But the hero, not dulled nor dismayed by his mishap, returns the keener to battle and grows violent in wrath, while shame and resolved valour kindle his strength. All afire, he hunts Dares headlong over the lists, and redoubles his blows now with right hand, now with left, no breath nor pause. Heavy as hailstones rattle on the roof from a storm cloud, so thickly shower the blows from both his hands as he buffets Dares to and fro. Then lord Aeneas allowed not wrath to swell higher, or Entellus to rage out his bitterness, but stopped the fight and rescued the exhausted Dares, saying thus in soothing words: "Unhappy! What height of madness hath seized thy mind? Knowest thou not the strength is another's, and the gods are changed? Yield thou to heaven." And with the words he proclaimed the battle over. But him his faithful mates lead to the ships, dragging his knees feebly, swaying his head from side to side, and spitting from his mouth clotted blood mingled with teeth. At summons they bear away the helmet and shield, and leave palm and bull to Entellus. At this the conqueror, swelling in pride over the bull, cries, "Goddess born, and you, O Trojans, learn thus what my strength of body was in its prime, and from what a death Dares is saved by your recall." He spoke, and stood right opposite in face of the bullock as it stood by, the prize of battle, then drew back his hand, and swinging the hard gauntlet sheer down between the horns, smashed the bones in upon the shattered brain. The ox rolls over, and quivering and lifeless lies along the ground. Above it he utters these deep accents: "This life, Eryx, I give to thee, a better payment than Dares' death. Here I lay down my gloves and unconquered skill." End of Section 9. Section 10 of the Aeneid. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Morgan Scorpion. The Aeneid by Virgil, translated by J.W. Mikhail. Book 5th, The Games of the Fleet, Part 2. Forthwith Aeneas invites all that will to the contest of the swift arrow, and proclaims the prizes. With his strong hand he uprears the mast of Serestus' ship, and on a cord crossing it hangs from the masthead a fluttering pigeon as mark for their steel. They gather, and a helmet of brass takes the lots as they throw them in. First in rank, and before them all, amid prosperous cheers, comes out Hippocoon, son of Hyrtacus, and Mnestheus follows on him, but now conqueror in the ship race, Mnestheus with his chaplet of green olive. Third is Eurytion, thy brother, O Pandarus, great in renown, thou who of old, when prompted to shatter the truce, did hurl the first shaft amid the Achaeans. Last of all, and at the bottom of the helmet, sank Acestes, he too venturing to set hand to the task of youth. Then each and all they strongly bend their bows into a curve, and pull shafts from their quivers. And first the arrow of the son of Hyrtacus, flying through heaven from the sounding string, whistles through the fleet breezes, and reaches and sticks fast full in the mast's wood. The mast quivered, and the bird fluttered her feathers in affright, and the whole ground rang with loud clapping. Next valiant Mnestheus took his stand with bow bent, aiming high with levelled eye and arrow, yet could not, unfortunate, hit the bird herself with his steel, but cut the knotted hempen bands that tied her foot as she hung from the masthead. She winged her flight into the dark windy clouds. Then Eurytion, who ere now held the arrow ready on his bended bow, swiftly called in prayer to his brother, marked the pigeon as she now went down the empty sky exultant on clapping wings, and as she passed under a dark cloud, struck her. She fell breathless, and leaving her life in the airy firmament, slid down carrying the arrow that pierced her. Acestes alone was over, and the prize lost, yet he sped his arrow into the air to display his lordly skill and resounding bow. At this a sudden sign meets their eyes, mighty in augural presage, as the high event taught thereafter, and in late days boding seers prophesied of the omen. For the flying reed blazed out amid the swimming clouds, traced its path in flame, and burned away on the light winds, even as often stars shooting from their sphere draw a train athwart the sky. Trinacrians and Trojans hung in astonishment, praying to the heavenly powers. Neither did great Aeneas reject the omen, but embraces glad Acestes and loads him with lavish gifts, speaking thus: "Take, my lord, for the high King of heaven by these signs hath willed thee to draw the lot of peculiar honour. This gift shalt thou have from aged Anchises' own hand, a bowl embossed with figures, that once Cisseus of Thrace gave my father Anchises to bear in high token and guerdon of affection." So speaking, he twines green bay about his brows, and proclaims Acestes conqueror first before them all. Nor did gentle Eurytion, though he alone struck the bird down from the lofty sky, grudge him to be preferred in honour. Next comes for his prize he who cut the cord, he last who pierced the mast with his winged reed. But lord Aeneas, ere yet the contest is sped, calls to him Epytides, guardian and attendant of ungrown Iülus, and thus speaks into his faithful ear: "Up and away, and tell Ascanius, if he now holds his band of boys ready, and their horses arrayed for the charge, to defile his squadrons to his grandsire's honour in bravery of arms." So says he, and himself bids all the crowding throng withdraw from the long racecourse and leave the lists free. The boys move in before their parents' faces, glittering in rank on their bitted horses. As they go, all the people of Troy and Trinacria murmur and admire. On the hair of them all rests a garland fitly trimmed. Each carries 2 cornel spear shafts tipped with steel. Some have polished quivers on their shoulders. Above their breast and round their neck goes a flexible circlet of twisted gold. 3 in number are the troops of riders, and 3 captains gallop up and down. Following each in equal command rides a glittering division of 12 boys. One youthful line goes rejoicingly behind little Priam, renewer of his grandsire's name, thy renowned seed, O Polites, and destined to people Italy. He rides a Thracian horse dappled with spots of white, showing white on his pacing pasterns and white on his high forehead. Second is Attis, from whom the Latin Atii draw their line, little Attis, boy beloved of the boy Iülus. Last, and excellent in beauty before them all, Iülus rode in on a Sidonian horse that Dido the bright had given him for token and pledge of love. The rest of them are mounted on old Acestes' Sicilian horses. The Dardanians greet their shy entrance with applause, and rejoice at the view, and recognise the features of their parents of old. When they have ridden merrily round all the concourse of their gazing friends, Epytides shouts from afar the signal they await, and sounds his whip. They gallop apart in equal numbers, and open their files 3 and 3 in deploying bands, and again at the call wheel about and bear down with levelled arms. Next they start on other charges, and other retreats in corresponsive spaces, and interlink circle with circle, and wage the armed phantom of battle. And now they bear their backs in flight, now turn their lances to the charge, now plight peace and ride on side by side. As once of old, they say, the labyrinth in high Crete had a tangled path between blind walls, and 1,000 ways of doubling treachery, where tokens to follow failed in the maze unmastered and irrecoverable. Even in such a track do the children of Troy entangle their footsteps, and weave the game of flight and battle, like dolphins who, swimming through the wet seas, cut Carpathian or Libyan. This fashion of riding, these games Ascanius first revived, when he girt Alba the Long about with walls, and taught their celebration to the old Latins in the way of his own boyhood, with the youth of Troy about him. The Albans taught it their children. On from them mighty Rome received it, and kept the ancestral observance. And now it is called Troy, and the boys the Trojan troop. Thus far spread the sacred contests to their holy lord. Just at this Fortune broke faith and grew estranged. While they pay the due rites to the tomb with diverse games, Juno, daughter of Saturn, sends Iris down the sky to the Ilian fleet, and breathes a gale to speed her on, revolving many a thought, and not yet satiate of the ancient pain. She, speeding her way along the thousand-coloured bow, runs swiftly, seen of none, down her maiden path. She discerns the vast concourse, and traverses the shore, and sees the haven abandoned and the fleet left alone. But far withdrawn by the solitary verge of the sea the Trojan women wept their lost Anchises, and as they wept gazed all together on the fathomless flood. Alas, after all those weary waterways, that so wide a sea is yet to come! Such is the single cry of all. They pray for a city, sick of the burden of their sea sorrow. So she darts among them, not witless to harm, and lays by face and raiment of a goddess. She becomes Beroe, the aged wife of Tmarian Doriclus, who had once had birth and name and children, and in this guise goes among the Dardanian matrons. "Ah, wretched we," she cries, "whom hostile Achaean hands did not drag to death beneath our native city. Ah, hapless race, for what destruction does Fortune hold thee back? The seventh summer now declines since Troy's overthrow, while we pass measuring out by so many stars the harbourless rocks over every water and land, pursuing all the while over the vast sea an Italy that flies us, and tossing on the waves. Here are our brother Eryx's borders, and Acestes' welcome. Who denies us to cast up walls and give our garden a city? O country, O household gods vainly rescued from the foe, shall there never be a Trojan town to tell of? Shall I nowhere see a Xanthus and a Simois, the rivers of Hector? Nay, up and join me in burning with fire these ill-ominous ships. For in sleep the phantom of Cassandra, the soothsayer, seemed to give me blazing brands. Here seek your Troy, she said, here is your home. Now is the time to do it, nor do these high portents allow delay. Behold, 4 altars to Neptune, the god himself lends the firebrand and the nerve." Speaking thus at once, she strongly seizes the fiery weapon, and with straining hand whirls it far upreared and flings. The souls of the Ilian women are startled and their wits amazed. At this, one of their multitude, and she the eldest, Pyrgo, nurse in the palace to all Priam's many children. "This is not Beroe, I tell you. O mothers, this is not the wife of Doriclus of Rhetum. Mark the lineaments of divine grace and the gleaming eyes. What a breath is hers, what a countenance, and the sound of her voice, and the steps of her going. I time agone left Beroe apart, sick and fretting that she alone must have no part in this our service, nor pay Anchises his due sacrifice." So spoke she. But the matrons at first, dubious and wavering, gazed on the ships with malignant eyes, between the wretched longing for the land they trod, and the fated realm that summoned them. When the goddess rose through the sky, on poised wings, and in her flight drew a vast bow beneath the clouds. Then indeed, amazed at the tokens, and driven by madness, they raise a cry and snatch fire from the hearths within. Others plunder the altars, and cast on brushwood boughs and brands. The fire god rages with loose rein over thwarts and oars and hulls of painted fir. Eumelus carries the news of the burning ships to the grave of Anchises and the ranges of the theatre, and looking back their own eyes see the floating cloud of dark ashes. And in a moment Ascanius, as he rode gaily before his cavalry, spurred his horse to the disordered camp, nor can his breathless guardians hold him back. "What strange madness is this?" he cries. "Whither now hasten you? Whither, alas and woe? O citizens, not on the foe, nor on some hostile Argive camp. It is your own hopes you burn. Behold me, your Ascanius." And he flung before his feet the empty helmet, put on when he roused the mimicry of war. Aeneas and the Trojan train together hurry to the spot. But the women scatter apart in fear all over the beach, and stealthily seek the woods and the hollow rocks they find. They loathe their deed and the daylight, and with changed eyes know their people, and Juno is startled out of their breast. But not thereby do the flames of the burning lay down their unconquered strength. Under the wet oak the seams are alive, spouting slow coils of smoke. The creeping heat devours the hulls, and the destroyer takes deep hold of all. Nor does the heroes' strength avail, nor the floods they pour in. Then good Aeneas rent away the raiment from his shoulders, and called the gods to aid, stretching forth his hands. "Jupiter omnipotent, if thou hatest not Troy yet wholly to her last man, if thine ancient pity looks at all on human woes, now, O Lord, grant our fleet to escape the flame, and rescue from doom the slender Teucrian estate. Or do thou plunge to death this raiment, if I deserve it, with levelled thunderbolt, and here with thine own hand smite us down." Scarce had he uttered this when a black tempest rages in streaming showers. Earth trembles to the thunder on plain and steep. The water flood rushes in torrents from the whole heaven amid black darkness and volleying blasts of the south. The ships are filled from overhead, the half-burnt timbers are soaking, till all the heat is quenched, and all the hulls, but 4 that are lost, are rescued from destruction. But lord Aeneas, dismayed by the bitter mischance, resolved at heart this way and that his shifting weight of care, whether, forgetting fate, he should rest in Sicilian fields, or reach forth to the borders of Italy. Then old Nautes, whom Tritonian Pallas taught like none other, and made famous in eminence of art, she granted him to reply what the gods' heavy anger menaced, or what the order of fate claimed. He then in accents of comfort thus speaks to Aeneas: "Goddess born, follow we fate's ebb and flow, whatsoever it shall be, fortune must be born to be overcome. Acestes is of thine own divine Dardanian race. Take him, for he is willing, to join thee in common council. Deliver to him those who are over, now these ships are lost, and those who are quite weary of thy fortunes and the great quest. Choose out the old men stricken in years, and the matrons sick of the sea, and all that is weak and fearful of peril in thy company. Let this land give a city to the weary. They shall be allowed to call their town Acesta by name." Then indeed, kindled by these words of his aged friend, his spirit is distracted among all his cares. And now black night rose chariot borne and held the sky, when the likeness of his father Anchises seemed to descend from heaven and suddenly utter thus: "O son, more dear to me than life once of old while life was yet mine, O son, hard wrought by the destinies of Ilium, I come hither by Jove's command, who drove the fire from thy fleets, and at last had pity out of high heaven. Obey thou the fair counsel aged Nautes now gives. Carry through to Italy thy chosen men and bravest souls. In Latium must thou war down a people hard and rough in living. Yet ere then draw thou nigh the nether chambers of Dis, and in the deep tract of hell come, O son, to meet me. For I am not held in cruel Tartarus among wailing ghosts, but inhabit Elysium and the sweet societies of the good. Hither with much blood of dark cattle shall the holy Sibyl lead thee. Then shalt thou learn of all thy line and what city is given thee. And now farewell. Dank night wheels her mid-career, and even now I feel the stern breath of the panting horses of the east." He ended, and retreated like a vapour into thin air. "Ah, whither hurriest thou?" cries Aeneas. "Whither so far away? From whom fliest thou? Or who withholds thee from our embrace?" So speaking, he kindles the sleeping embers of the fire, and with holy meal in laden censer does sacrifice to the tutelar of Pergama and hoar Vesta's secret shrine. Straightway he summons his crews and Acestes first of all, and instructs them of Jove's command and his beloved father's precepts, and what is now his fixed mind and purpose. They linger not in council, nor does Acestes decline his bidden duty. They enroll the matrons in their town and plant a people there, souls that will have none of glory. The rest repair the thwarts and replace the ship's timbers that the flames had gnawed upon, and fit up oars and rigging, little in number but alive and valiant for war. Meanwhile Aeneas traces the town with the plough and allots the homesteads. This he bids be Ilium, and these lands Troy. Trojan Acestes, rejoicing in his kingdom, appoints a court and gathers his senators to give them statutes. Next, where the crest of Eryx is neighbour to the stars, a dwelling is founded to Venus the Idalian, and a priest and breadth of holy wood is attached to Anchises' grave. And now for 9 days all the people hath feasted, and offering been paid at the altars. Quiet breezes have smoothed the ocean floor, and the gathering south wind blows, calling them again to sea. A mighty weeping arises along the winding shore, a night and a day they linger in mutual embraces. The very mothers now, the very men to whom once the sight of the sea seemed cruel and the name intolerable, would go on and endure the journey's travail to the end. These Aeneas comforts with kindly words, and commends with tears to his kinsman Acestes' care. Then he bids slay 3 steers to Eryx, and a she-lamb to the tempests, and loose the hawser as is due. Himself, his head bound with stripped leaves of olive, he stands apart on the prow holding the cup, and casts the entrails into the salt flood, and pours liquid wine. A wind rising astern follows them forth on their way. Emulously the crews strike the water, and sweep through the seas. But Venus meanwhile, wrought upon with distress, accosts Neptune and thus pours forth her heart's complaint. Juno's bitter wrath and heart insatiable compel me, O Neptune, to sink to the uttermost of entreaty. Neither length of days nor any goodness softens her, nor doth Jove's command and fate itself break her to desistance. It is not enough that her accursed hatred hath devoured the Phrygian city from among the people, and exhausted on it the stores of vengeance. Still she pursues this remnant, the bones and ashes of murdered Troy. I pray she knows why her passion is so fierce. Thyself art my witness what a sudden stir she raised of late on the Libyan waters, flinging all the seas to heaven in vain reliance on Aeolus' blasts. This she dared in thy realm. Lo too, driving the Trojan matrons into guilt, she hath foully burned their ships, and forced them, their fleet lost, to leave the crews to an unknown land. Let the remnant, I beseech thee, give their sails to thy safe keeping across the seas. Let them reach Laurentine Tiber. If I ask what is permitted, if fate grants them a city there. Then the son of Saturn, compeller of the ocean deep, uttered thus: It is wholly right, O Cytherean, that thy trust should be in my realm, whence thou drawest birth, and I have deserved it. Often have I allayed the rage and full fury of sky and sea. Nor less on land, I call Xanthus and Simois to witness, hath been my care of thine Aeneas. When Achilles pursued the Trojan armies and hurled them breathless on their walls, and sent many thousands to death, when the choked rivers groaned and Xanthus could not find passage or roll out to sea, then I snatched Aeneas away in sheltering mist, as he met the brave son of Peleus outmatched in strength and gods, eager as I was to overthrow the walls of perjured Troy that mine own hands had built. Now too my mind rests the same. Dismiss thy fear. In safety, as thou desirest, shall he reach the haven of Avernus. One will there be alone on whom the flood thou shalt lose and require. One life shall be given for many. With these words the goddess' bosom is soothed to joy. Then their lord yokes his wild horses with gold, and fastens the foaming bits, and letting all the reins run slack in his hand, flies lightly in his sea-coloured chariot over the ocean surface. The waves sink to rest, and the swollen waterways smooth out under the thundering axle. The storm clouds scatter from the vast sky. Diverse shapes attend him, monstrous whales and Glaucus' aged choir, and Palemon, son of Ino, the swift Tritons, and Phorcus with all his army. Thetis and Melite keep the left, and maiden Panopea, Nesaea and Spio, Thalia and Cymodoce. At this Lord Aeneas' soul is thrilled with soft counterchange of delight. He bids all the masts be upreared with speed, and the sails stretched on the yards. Together all set their sheets, and all at once slacken their canvas to left and again to right. Together they brace and unbrace the yard arms aloft. Prosperous gales waft the fleet along. First, in front of all, Palinurus steered the close column, the rest under orders ply their course by his. And now dewy night had just reached heaven's mid-cone, the sailors, stretched on their hard benches under the oars, relaxed their limbs in quiet rest, when sleep, sliding lightly down from the starry sky, parted the shadowy air and cleft the dark, seeking thee, O Palinurus, carrying dreams of bale to thee who dreamt not of harm, and lit on the high stern a god in Phoebus' likeness, dropping this speech from his lips: Palinurus, son of Iasus, the very seas bear our fleet along. The breezes breathe steadily, for an hour rest is given. Lay down thine hand and steal thy worn eyes from their toil. I myself for a little will take thy duty in thy stead. To whom Palinurus, scarcely lifting his eyes, returns: Wouldst thou have me ignorant what the calm face of the brine means, and the waves at rest? Shall I have faith in this perilous thing? How shall I trust Aeneas to deceitful breezes, and the placid treachery of the sky that hath so often deceived me? Such words he uttered, and, clinging fast to the tiller, slackened hold no whit, and looked up steadily on the stars. Lo, the god shakes over either temple a bough dripping with Lethean dew and made slumberous with the might of Styx, and makes his swimming eyes relax their struggles. Scarcely had sleep begun to slacken his limbs unaware, when bending down he flung him sheer into the clear water, tearing rudder and half the stern away with him, and many a time crying vainly on his comrades. Himself he rose on flying winds into the thin air. None the less does the fleet run safe on its sea path, and glides on unalarmed in Lord Neptune's assurance. Yes, and now they were sailing in to the cliffs of the Sirens, dangerous once of old and white with the bones of many a man, and the hoarse rocks echoed afar in the ceaseless surf, when her lord felt the ship rocking astray for loss of her helmsman, and himself steered her on over the darkling water, sighing often the while, and heavy at heart for his friend's mischance. Ah, too trustful in sky and sea's serenity thou shalt lie, O Palinurus, naked on an alien sand. End of section 10.
Section 11 of the Aeneid. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Aeneid by Virgil, translated by J.W. McHale. Chapter 6. The Vision of the Underworld, Part 1. So speaks he weeping, and gives his fleet the rein, and at last glides into Euboicumai's coast. They turn the prows seaward, the ships grounded fast on their anchors' teeth, and the curving ships line the beach. The warrior band leaps forth eagerly on the Hesperian shore. Some seek the seeds of flame, hidden in veins of flint. Some scour the woods, the thick coverts of wild beasts, and find and show the streams. But good Aeneas seeks the fortress where Apollo sits high enthroned, and the lone mystery of the awful Sibyl's cavern depth, over whose mind and soul the prophetic Delian breathes high inspiration and reveals futurity. Now they draw nigh the groves of Trivia and the roof of gold. Daedalus, as the story runs, when in flight from Minos' realm he dared to spread his fleet wings to the sky, glided on his unwonted way towards the icy northern star, and at length lit gently on the Chalcidian fastness. Here, on the first land he retrod, he dedicated his winged oarage to thee, O Phoebus, in the vast temple he built. On the doors is Androgeus' death. Thereby the children of Cecrops, bidden, me, to pay for yearly ransom 7 souls of their sons. The urn stands there, and the lots are drawn. Right opposite, the land of Gnosus rises from the sea. On it is the cruel love of the bull, the disguised stealth of Pasiphae, and the mingled breed and double issue of the Minotaur, record of a shameful passion. On it the famous dwelling's laborious inextricable maze. But Daedalus, pitying the great love of the princess, himself unlocked the tangled treachery of the palace, guiding with the clue her lover's blind footsteps. Thou too hadst no slight part in the work he wrought, O Icarus, did grief allow. Twice had he essayed to portray thy fate in gold, twice the father's hands dropped down. Nay, their eyes would scan all the story in order, were not Achates already returned from his errand, and with him the priestess of Phoebus and Trivia, Deiphobe, daughter of Glaucus, who thus accosts the king. Other than this are the sights the time demands. Now were it well to sacrifice 7 unbroken bullocks of the herd, as many fitly chosen sheep of 2 years old. Thus speaks she to Aeneas, nor do they delay to do her sacred bidding. And the priestess calls the Teucrians into the lofty shrine. A vast cavern is scooped in the side of the Euboic cliff, whither lead 100 wide passages by 100 gates, whence peal forth as manifold the responses of the Sibyl. They had reached the threshold when the maiden cries, "It is time to inquire thy fate. The god, lo, the god." And even as she spoke thus in the gateway, suddenly countenance nor colour nor ranged tresses stayed the same. Her wild heart heaves madly in her panting bosom, and she expands to sight, and her voice is more than mortal. Now the god breathes on her in nearer deity. "Lingerest thou to vow and pray," she cries, "Aeneas of Troy? Lingerest thou? For not till then will the vast portals of the spell-bound house swing open." So spoke she, and sank to silence. A cold shiver ran through the Teucrians' iron frames, and the king pours heart-deep supplication. "Phoebus, who hast ever pitied the sore travail of Troy, who didst guide the Dardanian shaft from Paris' hand full on the son of Aeacus, in thy leading have I pierced all these seas that skirt mighty lands, the Massilian nations far withdrawn, and the fields the Syrtes fringe. Thus far let the fortune of Troy follow us. You too may now unforbidden spare the nation of Pergama, gods and goddesses to whomsoever Ilium and the great glory of Dardania did wrong. And thou, O prophetess most holy, foreknower of the future, grant, for no unearned realm does my destiny claim, a resting place in Latium to the Teucrians, to their wandering gods and the storm-tossed deities of Troy. Then will I ordain to Phoebus and Trivia a temple of solid marble, and festal days in Phoebus' name. Thee likewise a mighty sanctuary awaits in our realm, for here I will place thine oracles and the secrets of destiny uttered to my people, and consecrate chosen men, O gracious one. Only commit not thou thy verses to leaves, lest they fly disordered, the sport of rushing winds. Thyself utter them, I beseech thee." His lips made an end of utterance. But the prophetess, not yet tame to Phoebus' hand, rages fiercely in the cavern, so she may shake the mighty godhead from her breast. So much the more does he tire her maddened mouth, and subdue her wild breast, and shape her to his pressure. And now the 100 mighty portals of the house open of their own accord, and bring through the air the answer of the soothsayer. O past at length with the great perils of the sea, though heavier yet by land await thee, the Dardanians shall come to the realm of Lavinium. Relieve thy heart of this care, but not so shall they have the joy of their coming. Wars, grim wars I discern, and Tiber afoam with streams of blood. A Simois shall not fail thee, a Xanthus, a Dorian camp. Another Achilles is already found for Latium, he too goddess born. Nor shall Juno's presence ever leave the Teucrians. While thou in thy need, to what nations or what towns of Italy shalt thou not sue? Again is an alien bride the source of all that Teucrian woe, again a foreign marriage chamber. Yield not thou to distresses, but all the bolder go forth to meet them, as thy fortune shall allow thee way. The path of rescue, little as thou deemest it, shall first open from a Grecian town. In such words the Sibyl of Cumae chants from the shrine her perplexing terrors, echoing through the cavern truth wrapped in obscurity. So does Apollo clash the reins and ply the goad in her maddened breast. So soon as the spasm ceased and the raving lips sank to silence, Aeneas the hero begins: No shape of toil, O maiden, rises strange or sudden on my sight. All this ere now have I guessed and inly rehearsed in spirit. One thing I pray: since here is the gate named of the infernal king, and the darkling marsh of Acheron's overflow, be it given me to go to my beloved father, to see him face to face. Teach thou the way, and open the consecrated portals. Him on these shoulders I rescued from encircling flames and 1,000 pursuing weapons, and brought him safe from amid the enemy. He accompanied my way over all the seas, and bore with me all the threats of ocean and sky, in weakness, beyond his age's strength and due. Nay, it was he who besought and enjoined me to seek thy grace and draw nigh thy courts. Have pity, I beseech thee, on son and father, O gracious one, for thou art all-powerful, nor in vain hath Hecate given thee rule in the groves of Avernus. If Orpheus could call up his wife's ghost in the strength of his Thracian lyre and the music of the strings, if Pollux redeemed his brother by exchange of death, and passes and repasses so often, why make mention of great Theseus, why of Alcides? I too am of Jove's sovereign race. In such words he pleaded and clasped the altars, when the soothsayer thus began to speak: O sprung of God's blood, child of Anchises of Troy, easy is the descent into hell. All night and day the gate of dark Dis stands open. But to recall thy steps and issue to upper air, this is the task and burden. Some few of God's lineage have availed, such as Jupiter's gracious favour or virtue's ardour hath upborne to heaven. Midway all is muffled in forest, and the black coils of Cocytus circle it round. Yet if thy soul is so passionate and so desirous twice to float across the Stygian lake, twice to see dark Tartarus, and thy pleasure is to plunge into the mad task, learn what must first be accomplished. Hidden in a shady tree is a bough with leafage and pliant shoot all of gold, consecrate to nether Juno, wrapped in the depth of woodland and shut in by dim dusky veils. But to him only who first hath plucked the golden tressed fruitage from the tree is it given to enter the hidden places of the earth. This hath beautiful Proserpine ordained to be borne to her for her proper gift. The first torn away, a second fills the place in gold, and the spray burgeons with even such ore again. So let thine eyes trace it home, and thine hand pluck it duly when found, for lightly and unreluctant will it follow if thine is fate's summons. Else will no strength of thine avail to conquer it, nor hard steel to cut it away. Yet again a friend of thine lies a lifeless corpse, alas, thou knowest it not, and defiles all the fleet with death, while thou seekest our counsel and lingerest in our courts. First lay him in his resting place, and hide him in the tomb. Lead thither black cattle. Be this thine first expiation. So at last shalt thou behold the Stygian groves, and the realm untrodden of the living. She spoke, and her lips shut to silence. Aeneas goes forth, and leaves the cavern with fixed eyes and sad countenance, his soul revolving inly the unseen issues. By his side goes faithful Achates, and plants his footsteps in equal perplexity. Long they ran on in mutual change of talk. Of what lifeless comrade spoke the soothsayer? Of what body for burial? And even as they came, they see on the dry beach Misenus, cut off by untimely death, Misenus the Aeolid, excelled of none other in stirring men with brazen breath, and kindling battle with his trumpet note. He had been attendant on mighty Hector. In Hector's train he waged battle, renowned alike for bugle and spear. After victorious Achilles robbed him of life, the valiant hero had joined Dardanian Aeneas' company, and followed no meaner leader. But now, while he makes his hollow shell echo over the seas, fool, and calls the gods to rival his blast, jealous Triton, if belief is due, had caught him among the rocks, and sunk him in the foaming waves. So all surrounded him with loud murmur and cries, good Aeneas the foremost. Then weeping they quickly hasten on the Sibyl's orders, and work hard to pile trees for the altar of burial, and heap it up into the sky. They move into the ancient forest, the deep coverts of game. Pitch pines fall flat, ilex rings to the stroke of axes, and ashen beams and oak are split in clefts with wedges. They roll in huge mountain ashes from the hills. Aeneas likewise is first in the work, and cheers on his crew and arms himself with their weapons. And alone with his sad heart he ponders it all, gazing on the endless forest, and utters this prayer: If but now that bough of gold would show itself to us on the tree in this depth of woodland! Since all the soothsayer's tale of thee, Misenus, was, alas, too truly spoken. Scarcely had he said thus, when twin doves haply came flying down the sky, and lit on the green sod right under his eyes. Then the kingly hero knows them for his mother's birds, and joyfully prays, be my guides, if way there be, and direct your airy passage into the groves where the rich bough overshadows the fertile ground, and thou, O goddess mother, fail not our wavering fortune. So spoke he, and stayed his steps, marking what they signify, whither they urge their way. Feeding and flying they advance at such distance as following eyes could keep them in view. Then, when they came to Avernus' pestilent gorge, they tower swiftly, and sliding down through the liquid air, choose their seat and light side by side on a tree, through whose boughs shone out the contrasting flicker of gold. As in chill midwinter the woodland is wont to blossom with the strange leafage of the mistletoe, sown on an alien tree and wreathing the smooth stems with burgeoning saffron. So on the shadowy ilex seemed that leafy gold, so the foil tinkled in the light breeze. Immediately Aeneas seizes it, and eagerly breaks off its resistance, and carries it beneath the Sibyl's roof. And therewithal the Teucrians on the beach wept Misenus, and bore the last rites to the thankless ashes. First they build up a vast pyre of resinous billets and sawn oak, whose sides they entwine with dark leaves, and plant funereal cypresses in front, and adorn it above with his shining armour. Some prepare warm water in cauldrons bubbling over the flames, and wash and anoint the chill body, and make their moan. Then, their weeping done, lay his limbs on the pillow, and spread over it crimson raiment, the accustomed pall. Some uplift the heavy bier, a melancholy service, and with averted faces in their ancestral fashion hold and thrust in the torch. Gifts of frankincense, food, and bowls of olive oil are poured and piled upon the fire. After the embers sank in and the flame died away, they soaked with wine the remnant of thirsty ashes, and Coroneus gathered the bones and shut them in an urn of brass. And he too thrice encircled his comrades with fresh water, and cleansed them with light spray sprinkled from a bough of fruitful olive, and spoke the last words of all. But good Aeneas heaps a mighty mounded tomb over him, with his own armour and his oar and trumpet, beneath a skyey mountain that now is called Misenus after him, and keeps his name immortal from age to age. This done, he hastens to fulfil the Sibyl's ordinance. A deep cave yawned dreary and vast, shingle-strewn, sheltered by the black lake and the gloom of the forests. Over it no flying things could wing their way unharmed. Such a vapour streamed from the dark gorge and rose into the overarching sky. Here the priestess first arrays 4 black-bodied bullocks, and pours wine upon their forehead, and plucking the topmost hairs from between the horns, lays them on the sacred fire for first offering, calling aloud on Hecate, mistress of heaven and hell. Others lay knives beneath, and catch the warm blood in cups. Aeneas himself smites with the sword a black-fleeced she-lamb to the mother of the Eumenides and her mighty sister, and a barren heifer, Proserpine, to thee. Then he uprears darkling altars to the Stygian king, and lays whole carcasses of bulls upon the flames, pouring fat oil over the blazing entrails. And lo! about the first rays of sunrise the ground moaned underfoot, and the woodland ridges began to stir, and dogs seemed to howl through the dusk as the goddess came. Apart! Ah, keep apart, O ye unsanctified, cries the soothsayer. Retire from all the grove, and thou stride on, and unsheathe thy steel. Now is need of courage, O Aeneas, now of strong resolve. So much she spoke, and plunged madly into the cavern's opening. He with unflinching steps keeps pace with his advancing guide. Gods who are sovereign over souls, silent ghosts, and chaos and phlegethon, the wide dumb realm of night, as I have heard, so let me tell, and according to your will unfold things sunken deep under earth in gloom. They went darkling through the dusk beneath the solitary night, through the empty dwellings and bodiless realm of Dis, even as one walks in the forest beneath the jealous light of a doubtful moon, when Jupiter shrouds the sky in shadow, and black night blots out the world. Right in front of the doorway, and in the entry of the jaws of hell, grief and avenging cares have made their bed. There dwell wan sicknesses and gloomy eld, and fear, and ill-counselling hunger, and loathly want, shapes terrible to see, and death and travail, and thereby sleep death's kinsman, and the soul's guilty joys, and death-dealing war full in the gateway, and the Furies in their iron cells, and mad Discord with blood-stained fillets enwreathing her serpent locks. Midway an elm, shadowy and high, spreads her boughs and secular arms, where, one saith, idle dreams dwell clustering, and cling under every leaf. And monstrous creatures besides, many and diverse, keep covert at the gates, centaurs and twy-shaped Scyllas, and the hundredfold Briareus, and the beast of Lerna hissing horribly, and the Chimera, armed with flame, Gorgons and Harpies, and the body of the triform shade. Here Aeneas snatches at his sword in a sudden flutter of terror, and turns the naked edge on them as they come. And did not his wise fellow-passenger remind him that these lives flit thin and unessential in the hollow mask of body, he would rush on and vainly lash through phantoms with his steel. Hence a road leads to Tartarus and Acheron's wave. Here the dreary pool swirls thick in muddy eddies, and disgorges into Cocytus with its load of sand. Charon, the dread ferryman, guards these flowing streams, ragged and awful, his chin covered with untrimmed masses of hoary hair, and his glassy eyes aflame. His soiled raiment hangs knotted from his shoulders. Himself he plies the pole, and trims the sails of his vessel, the steel-blue galley with freight of dead. Stricken now in years, but a god's old age is lusty and green. Hither all crowded and rushed streaming to the bank, matrons and men and high-hearted heroes dead and done with life, boys and unwedded girls, and children laid young on the bier before their parents' eyes, multitudinous as leaves fall dropping in the forest at autumn's earliest frost, or birds swarm landward from the deep gulf, when the chill of the year routs them overseas and drives them to sunny lands. They stood pleading for the first passage across, and stretched forth passionate hands to the farther shore. But the grim sailor admits now one and now another, while some he pushes back far apart on the strand. Moved with marvel at the confused throng, "Say, O maiden," cries Aeneas, "what means this flocking to the river? Of what are the souls so fain? Or what difference makes these retire from the banks, those go with sweeping oars over the leaden waterways?" To him the long-lived priestess thus briefly returned: "Seed of Anchises, most sure progeny of gods, thou seest the deep pools of Cocytus and the Stygian marsh, by whose divinity the gods fear to swear falsely. All this crowd thou discernest is helpless and unsepultured. Charon is the ferryman; they who ride on the wave found a tomb. Nor is it given to cross the awful banks and hoarse streams ere the dust hath found a resting place. 100 years they wander here, flitting about the shore. Then at last they gain entrance, and revisit the pools so sorely desired." Anchises' son stood still, and ponderingly stayed his footsteps, pitying at heart their cruel lot. There he discerns, mournful and unhonoured dead, Leucaspis and Orontes, captains of the Lycian squadron, whom, as they sailed together from Troy over gusty seas, the south wind overwhelmed and wrapped the waters round ship and men. Lo! there went by Palinurus the steersman, who of late, while he watched the stars on their Libyan passage, had slipped from the stern and fallen amid the waves. To him, when he first knew the melancholy form in that depth of shade, he thus opened speech: "What god, O Palinurus, reft thee from us, and sank thee amid the seas? Forth and tell! For in this single answer Apollo deceived me, never found false before, when he prophesied thee safety on ocean and arrival on the Ausonian coasts. See, is this his promise keeping?" And he: "Neither did Phoebus on his oracular seat delude thee, O Prince, Anchises' son, nor did any god drown me in the sea. For while I clung to my appointed charge and governed our course, I pulled the tiller with me in my fall, and the shock as I slipped wrenched it away. By the rough seas I swear, fear for myself never wrung me so sore as for thy ship, lest, the rudder lost and the pilot struck away, those gathering waves might master it. 3 wintry nights in the water the blustering south drove me over the endless sea. Scarcely on the 4th dawn I descried Italy as I rose on the climbing wave. Little by little I swam shoreward. Already I clung safe, but while, encumbered with my dripping raiment, I caught with crooked fingers at the jagged needles of mountain rock, the barbarous people attacked me in arms and ignorantly deemed me a prize. Now the wave holds me, and the winds toss me on the shore. By heaven's pleasant light and breezes I beseech thee, by thy father, by Iülus thy rising hope, rescue me from these distresses, O unconquered one. Either do thou, for thou canst, cast earth over me and again seek the haven of Velia, or do thou, if in any wise that may be, if in any wise the goddess who bore thee shows a way, for not without divine will do I deem thou wilt float across these vast rivers and the Stygian pool. Lend me a pitying hand, and bear me over the waves in thy company, that at least in death I may find a quiet resting place. Thus he ended, and the soothsayer thus began: Whence, O Palinurus, this fierce longing of thine? Shalt thou without burial behold the Stygian waters and the awful river of the Furies? Cease to hope prayers may bend the decrees of heaven, but take my words to thy memory for comfort in thy woeful case. Far and wide shall the bordering cities be driven by celestial portents to appease thy dust. They shall rear a tomb, and pay the tomb a yearly offering, and for evermore shall the place keep Palinurus' name. The words soothed away his distress, and for a while drove grief away from his sorrowing heart. He is glad in the land of his name. So they complete their journey's beginning, and draw nigh the river. Just then the watermen descried them from the Stygian wave, advancing through the silent woodland, and turning their feet towards the bank, and opens on them in these words of challenge: Whoso thou art, who marchest in arms towards our river, forth and say, there as thou art, why thou comest, and stay thine advance. This is the land of shadows, of sleep and slumberous night. No living body may the Stygian hull convey. Nor truly had I joy of taking Alcides on the lake for passenger, nor Theseus and Pirithous, born of gods though they were, and unconquered in might. He laid fettering hand on the warder of Tartarus, and dragged him cowering from the throne of my lord the king. They essayed to ravish our mistress from the bridal chamber of Dis. Thereto the Amphrysian soothsayer made brief reply: No such plot is here. Be not moved, nor do our weapons offer violence. The huge gatekeeper may bark on for ever in his cavern, and affright the bloodless ghosts. Proserpine may keep her honour within her uncle's gates. Aeneas of Troy, renowned in goodness as in arms, goes down to meet his father in the deep shades of Erebus. If the sight of such affection stirs thee in no wise, yet this bow (she discovers the bow hidden in her raiment) thou must know. Then his heaving breast allays its anger, and he says no more, but marvelling at the awful gift, the fated rod so long unseen, he steers in his dusky vessel and draws to shore. Next he routs out the souls that sat on the long benches, and clears the thwarts, while he takes mighty Aeneas on board. The galley groaned under the weight in all her seams, and the marsh water leaked fast in. At length prophetess and prince are landed unscathed on the ugly ooze and livid sedge. End of section 11.